A while ago I played Knights of a Temple, Infernal Crusade. It was a pretty fun hack-and-slash adventure where you got to crusade all over bad guys and demons as a cool Templar guy. But apparently there was a sequel, simply titled Knights of a Temple 2, released in 2005 and developed by Cauldron. To say that this game flew under the radar would be the understatement of a century. There are barely any reviews or videos about it, and it's a really hard game to find in the first place. It's not on Steam or GOG, so unless you wanna rummage through shady digital platforms and torrent sites, you'll need to track a physical copy to play this one, or emulate it like the sneaky little pirate you are. I don't think I've ever seen a sequel being treated so badly. Even though it tried being a more open-world RPG experience compared to its simple action predecessor, it scored worse than the first game. Just take a look at what JJ Kilroy wrote about it on Amazon. Game style. This is a boring RPG a la the old Nintendo games. Graphics. More like 1990s choppy blocky style. Combat. Again, more like the old Nintendo games with very little swordsmanship. Atmosphere. More like Japanimation than medieval Europe. Also, the game aims at attacking the Catholic Church and glorifying the jihadists that were invading Europe during the Middle Ages. 0 stars. Okay, this guy obviously has no idea what he's talking about, but still, I wanna find out why this game didn't receive the attention it deserved. So let's equip ourselves with the armor of God and the sword of the Spirit, and question why Jesus didn't become a blacksmith instead of a carpenter as we explore what Knights of the Temple 2 is all about. The adventure begins 20 years after the first game. Paul Dirac, the main hero, is plagued by visions of imminent doom by the hordes of hell. Also, Adele, his girlfriend who he saved in the previous game, is now possessed by, guess who, Satan himself, who intends to use her magic powers to open the gate of hell and rule over Earth for all eternity. Kind of a sticky situation, but luckily Paul, in his 20 years of searching and traveling, has found the secret of sealing the gate and saving mankind. He has also discovered the secret to immortality, because he hasn't aged a bit all these years. Anyway, there are 3 artifacts from beyond the birth of Jesus that can save the world from destruction when used. The eye will show the location of the gate, the weapon will break the seal guarding it, and the key will close the portal once and for all. Each artifact is hidden in a different city that Paul must journey to. We can retrieve the artifacts in a non-linear, kinda open-worldly fashion, with each location being its own adventure. In the plague-ridden city of Sirmium, Paul must sneak into the temple and retrieve the eye from the corrupted priests. In the war-torn city of Ilgar, Paul must break the siege laid by the Saracens and find the pirate who knows the location of the mysterious underwater fortress, which hides the weapon inside. Finally, in Yursa, Paul is imprisoned for asking too many questions. He must escape and travel into a different dimension to retrieve a rune from a demon. With all the artifacts in our possession, we must travel to the Island of the Dead, where its guardians demand that we pay gold for every human life we've taken in this adventure. I of course kill them where they stand, because demons are like terrorists. Never negotiate with them or give them money. And with that, we finally confront Satan and send him back to the depths of Netflix where he belongs. But this is where things get more interesting, because there are two endings we can unlock. Many quests can be resolved in either a good way or a bad way. Depending on our choices, we gain destiny points that influence the ending cutscene. In the good ending, Paul sacrifices himself to prevent Satan from possessing his soul, but in the bad ending, he becomes the devil's new vessel. Yeah, both endings are incredibly short and underwhelming. As for the story, it's as simple as it gets. No secondary plots or twists and turns, just get the artifacts, fight Satan, and it's game over. There are a few side quests that blend into the main plot, and that's a tiny bit interesting I suppose, but overall the game's story feels overly simplistic and rushed. Adele is criminally underutilized and Paul barely has any interactions or character progression throughout the adventure. As for the supposed good ending, it's so disappointing you could easily confuse it with a bad one. In any case, it's clear that the story wasn't the main focus here, but the gameplay and the world building. Let's see how the game performs in these areas. Regarding the graphics and the sound, Knights of the Temple 2 is a great improvement over the original. There is a vast variety of different places you'll explore, like a city in ruins, a bustling port, a shipwreck, and even more exotic areas like a jungle and a haunted island. Every location looks amazing, the textures are detailed, and the overall presentation is polished, especially for the standards of the time. Yeah, some of the distant areas are just crusty JPEGs, but compromises need to be made for such a title. What impressed me the most about each level though was the atmosphere. Places like Sirmium look absolutely depressing as we navigate through the dark alleys filled with death and decay. Other places like Ilgar, although small with only a minimal number of NPCs inside, manage to convey a large grander scale, adding to the epic scope of the adventure. I was fully immersed in the game's world, which was further enhanced by the models and the animations. Gone are the bizarrely timed attack animations of the first game. Now every movement, attack and interaction looks much more natural and realistic, even though they're slower compared to the first game. As for the models, they look awesome and accurately depict the medieval era of the adventure. I just have a couple of minor complaints. Some of the swords resemble high fantasy designs rather than those typical of medieval fantasy. Additionally, our starting armor looks kinda goofy, as it makes Paul look more like someone trick-or-treating in cheap knight armor than a true Templar of the Holy Order. Also, the UI feels way too simplistic and doesn't fit well with the rest of the game's theme. Besides that though, everything looks beautiful and comfy, with an amazing soundtrack that will pull you into the game's world. I'll admit my expectations were low since the first game's music didn't really grab my attention, but thankfully I was wrong here, as the game is full of impressive orchestral compositions that make the combat segments intense and hectic, while the exploration sections have a foreboding vibe to them. It's a shame the tracks are so short though, as the music can get repetitive after a while. As for the sound effects, they're nothing really to write home about. They are your typical hacking and slashing sounds. Every minor character is also voiced, but only during their first line of dialogue, which cheapens the experience by a lot. But I guess their budget was too limited for a fully voice-acted experience. For some reason, Paul and some of the enemies spoke in Russian instead of English, but only at specific levels. Maybe it had to do with the completely legal way I got this game. In any case, Knights of the Temple 2 is a beautiful game with impressive graphics that effectively portray a believable medieval world, and a soundtrack that will pump you up for an epic adventure, fighting demons and bad guys with our divine power of hitting things with a sword until they die. Before I continue, I'd like to remind everyone that this is a third-person action-adventure game made in 2005, featuring medieval knights as well as a swamp that limits your movement and constantly poisons you. Demon's Souls came out in 2009, by the way. So is there anything you'd like to say for yourself, Miyazaki, you fucking hack? No? Alright then, let's just move on to the gameplay. Knights of the Temple 2 is plagued by both its ambitious scope and jankiness, but that's to be expected because this game is almost nothing like its predecessor. This is a full-blown open-world RPG, complete with customizing your equipment, leveling up your stats and skills, and completing side quests. The role-playing elements are by far the best aspect of the game. It's really fun exploring the world, unlocking new areas to travel to, and becoming gradually stronger with new gear and more powerful skills to defeat your enemies. However, this non-linear progression system is not without its faults. The fact that you can acquire the artifacts needed in any order you want means you can acquire the best weapon in the game right from the start, completely trivializing the rest of the experience, while there's no real plot to motivate you to keep going. However, the game's depth and the different ways you can approach a situation can make your playthrough more interesting if you're willing to invest the time needed to complete the various missions and upgrade your gear. While the role-playing aspect of the game was very enjoyable, I found the combat to be rather lacking. All the spells, combos and special attacks of the first game make a return here, along with some new additions, but the overall feeling of fighting enemies lacks the fluidity of its predecessor. Locking onto enemies is automatic and slows you down to a crawl, and your combos are much slower and delayed, making everything a much more stilted and cumbersome experience. There is not much strategy in how you approach combat scenarios either, as you'll mostly spam your basic attacks and block occasionally. After a few level ups, fighting becomes pretty much a joke, since you can abuse your archery skills to kill enemies in one hit, and the charge attack can defeat even the strongest mini-bosses with barely any effort. There are, however, a few unique boss fights that you can encounter throughout the adventure that will challenge your abilities to their fullest potential. Well, not really. The boss fights felt too underwhelming and gimmicky for my taste. And when there weren't any gimmicks, it was just a tug of war between who'd get stun-locked first. Satan, the final boss, is by far the worst, since you don't even get to fight him properly. During his first phase, you have to destroy 3 crystals, while he flies around pelting you with his demonic boogers. During the second phase, you just have to smack his face over and over to push him into the void. No challenge, no strategy, just tedious button mashing, all for a lame 30-second ending. As a hack and slash game, Knights of the Temple 2 is a downgrade. There are glitches everywhere, the combat and menus are unresponsive, and everything is too slow and easy to be truly enjoyable, while some of the mechanics like the stealth and the weapon durability are incredibly shallow and nothing more than a superficial addition. But as a role-playing game, it's a pretty fun and immersive experience. I had a great time discovering new locations and secrets, while completing quests and turning Paul into a Deus vaulting powerhouse. The level design is amazing too, filled with intricate areas, tons of Easter eggs, and platforming segments, even though Paul's vertical is miserable. I guess what they say is true, white knights cannot jump. Despite all the extras though, the game is still very short, lasting at most about 5 hours. And that truly sucks, because despite the janky and underwhelming gameplay, I wanted more. After all, it was an entertaining experience, well worth my time. You know, after completing the game and reading various reviews, I don't understand why Knights of the Temple 2 was received so negatively. Sure, it has many faults and it's by no means a perfect game. The plot is non-existent and the combat can be broken and unsatisfying, while there are glitches and inconsistencies everywhere. But the scope of the game is very ambitious and its role-playing mechanics complement the atmosphere and world building nicely, providing an immersive experience with great graphics and music. How does it fare against the first game though? I really cannot judge, as we are pretty much completely different genres, but all I can say is that if you enjoyed the first game and were able to overlook its flaws, then as long as you keep an open mind, you'll likely enjoy the sequel just as much, if not more. If you want more of what the first game offered, or deep and involved mechanics, you're gonna be disappointed. It's up to you, but remember, if you get the PC version, remap the controls immediately. They are abhorrent. I'm talking about numpad levels of horribleness. In any case, that's all I had to say about Knights of the Temple 2. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stuff. You know how it goes. You can also support me on Patreon or become a channel member for early access to my videos and other perks. Have a great day, and until next time, take care and have fun.